Right now, somewhere in your life, there is a moment you still replay, a conversation, a silence, a version of you that reacted before you understood why. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because by the end, you're going to know exactly why that moment happened, and it has nothing to do with what you thought it did. Most people believe intelligence is something you can measure, a grade, a vocabulary, a number on a test. But the mind isn't a scoreboard, it's a survival system, built in rooms you didn't choose, by people who never asked if you were ready. And the real signs of low intelligence, the ones that actually shape how someone moves through life, have almost nothing to do with what they know. They have everything to do with what they were never allowed to feel safe doing. Watch closely. One of these 7 is about to describe you with unsettling precision. The first sign shows up in arguments that should have ended long before they did. You know the exact moment. The point where you were technically right, but continuing to fight for it cost you something bigger. The room's patience, the relationship, your own peace. And still, you couldn't let go. This isn't confidence. This is a nervous system that once learned being wrong was dangerous. A parent who turned mistakes into disappointment. A classroom where the wrong answer meant every face turning toward you. Somewhere, being incorrect stopped being a small event and became a verdict on your worth. So a wall got built, brick by brick, without a single blueprint, and for years you called that wall certainty. You wore it like armor at work, in relationships, even in conversations that meant nothing, because some old part of you never learned the difference between an opinion and an attack. And the exhausting part is, that armor doesn't come off when you get home. It doesn't know the argument is over. It just keeps standing guard long after the danger has passed. Some people carry that armor into rooms where no one was ever going to hurt them, and wonder quietly why they still feel so tired at the end of an ordinary day. The second sign hides in plain sight, because it looks nothing like weakness, an allergy to silence. Someone asks a question, and before the true answer has even formed, you've already filled the gap with a guess, a joke, anything to avoid sitting inside that unbearable stretch where you might look like you don't know something. Real understanding can tolerate that stretch. It can hold an unanswered question without flinching. What looks like slowness in some people is often the opposite. A mind so worn out from performing certainty that it never learned how to say, "I don't know," and survive the quiet that follows. Somewhere along the way, silence itself started to feel like evidence, proof that you'd been caught, that you had nothing, that the gap would expose you. So you learned to talk your way across every gap before anyone could look inside it. It becomes a kind of quiet performance, repeated so many times a day that you stop noticing you're doing it at all. Hold on to that one. It comes back later, heavier than you expect. The third sign is one people spot instantly in others, long before they ever catch it in the mirror, shutting the door on anything unfamiliar instead of stepping toward it. A new idea, a different way of living, a person who doesn't think like you. And instead of curiosity, something in you slams that door shut and calls it stupid or fake or beneath you. This isn't arrogance, it's armor. Curiosity requires admitting there's more to learn, and that admission requires a self-worth sturdy enough to survive the gap. Some people never got the chance to build that. They were only ever praised for being right, only ever loved when they achieved. So not knowing stopped feeling like an invitation. It became a threat to survive, and the fastest way to survive a threat is to dismiss it before it gets close enough to matter. The irony is that the door closes fastest around the exact ideas that could have changed everything, the ones that might have made the walls feel unnecessary in the first place. The fourth sign lives in the body before it ever reaches the mind, reacting before understanding is even possible. Feedback lands, and your chest tightens before a single word has been processed. Your jaw sets. Your walls rise, instantly, automatically. Not because the feedback was cruel, but because somewhere, feedback once meant danger. A raised voice, a cold silence, a love that had to be earned through flawless performance. This is where something shifts. Because once you can see this pattern clearly, it stops looking like a flaw in your character. It becomes what it actually is. A scar that learned how to fight before you ever learned how to think. And scars, no matter how old, still remember the moment they were made. They don't check the calendar before they react. They just feel the old danger and respond as if no time has passed at all. As if the person standing in front of you now is the same one who hurt you then. The fifth sign disguises itself as comfort, which is exactly what makes it so hard to catch. Surrounding yourself only with people who agree with you. It feels warm, safe, familiar. But a room where nothing ever challenges you isn't safety. It's a sealed room with no windows. No new light gets in. No old belief ever gets tested. And without a single dramatic moment, without you ever noticing the exact day it happened, the whole world quietly shrinks down to the size of your own reflection. You stop meeting people who disagree with you. You start calling that peace. It isn't peace. It's a smaller and smaller room, decorated to look like the whole world. And the strangest part is that from inside the room, it never feels small. It feels complete, right up until something from outside finally gets in, and the whole illusion trembles. The sixth sign is nearly invisible, because it's built into how the human brain is wired to trust, mistaking volume for truth. The loudest person in the room isn't always the one who understands the most, but something ancient inside us still confuses certainty with correctness. So people who are unsure learn to sound sure. Not out of dishonesty, but because somewhere, hesitation was punished and false confidence was rewarded. It isn't manipulation, it's survival, wearing the mask of personality. And underneath that mask is someone who has been performing certainty for so long, they've almost forgotten what it feels like to simply say, "I'm not sure." The mask gets so familiar, it starts to feel like skin, and taking it off, even for a moment, can feel like standing in public with nothing on at all. The seventh sign ties every single one of these together at the root, never turning around to examine your own thinking. Not what you believe, but why you believe it. Not the thought itself, but whose voice it originally belonged to before you mistook it for your own. Because here is the truth almost nobody says out loud. Most of what feels like who you are was installed by people who never asked your permission. A parent's anxiety became your caution. A teacher's impatience became your fear of mistakes. One silence at one dinner table became a lifelong fear of conflict. The real divide was never between smart people and everyone else. It was between people who go back and examine the walls they were handed, and people who mistake those walls for the shape of their own mind. Most people live their entire lives inside a house they never chose, mistaking the furniture for their own personality, never once asking who built the walls, or why the doors only ever seem to open one way. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this list, here is the part that changes everything. None of it means what you feared it meant. It means you were shaped by rooms you didn't choose, and you defended yourself with the only tools available at the time. Tools built before you were old enough to know better ones existed. The need to win. The fear of silence. The closed door. The armor before understanding. The comfort of agreement. The confusion between confidence and truth. The thinking that was never once questioned. None of these were ever proof of a small mind. They were proof of a nervous system that learned, far too early, how to survive being misunderstood. And a nervous system that learns to survive is not broken. It's doing exactly what it was built to do, in exactly the conditions it was given. Which means the real question was never how intelligent you are. It was always how safe you were ever allowed to feel while thinking out loud, questioning out loud, being wrong out loud. You weren't born defensive. You weren't born certain about everything. You weren't born afraid of a little silence. Somewhere, someone taught you that your own mind was dangerous ground to walk on. And somewhere quietly, with no dramatic moment required, you get to teach yourself something gentler instead. That not knowing was never weakness. That being wrong was never shame. That a quiet mind was never an empty one. It was never about intelligence. It was always about safety. And now finally you know why.